but the show must go on. But it's time to rise up. It's time to rise up and get our shit together and say, what direction are we going as a nation? What is going on here? How much further are we willing to go down this path? I've done a lot of reflecting in the last couple days. Yesterday at the farm, I sat there at the front most of the day just in my truck, just thinking and contemplating and just looking at the pens and just looking at the police or the RCMP across the way and just really reflecting on essentially what the last 7 weeks were like with this whole process. I've been a Canadian that has always promoted my country. You guys all know that, going back to the Freedom Convoy, even before. It's always been about making Canada better. It's never been about wanting Canada to disappear. It's always been about reestablishing and redefining what makes this country good, what makes this country great. And that's something that's always driven me. Back to the Canadians Against Health Passport days. I don't know if any of you guys are members of that group. It's got like 135,000. I started that one kind of right around when the government started pushing us around with COVID-19 vaccine mandates and health mandates that were really starting to put overreach on our shoulders, hinder the way our lives were going, preventing us from making choices for ourselves, just living good, healthy lives in our own ways. I've always just been about, hey, this is Canada. We have to make it better. We have to work hard. We have to stand up. Sometimes we have to get loud. As you can tell, my voice is just coming back now. I got really loud on the 6th and the 7th there. Sometimes we got to get a little loud about it. And we have to remind the people that are participating in the actions that it's messed up, that it's wrong, that it's diabolical, that we're going down a path that we don't want to go down. And if we go too far down that path, too far down that hole, we'll be too deep to climb out of it. And people are like, oh, no, that can't happen in Canada. It could never happen in Canada. We're Canada. We're a democracy. House of Commons. Part of the Commonwealth. We'll talk to someone from Venezuela. I got a lot of buddies from Venezuela that I've met over the years. And talk to someone from Venezuela and ask them what Venezuela was like 20 years before shit really hit the fan in that country. It was really good. The country wasn't doing too bad at all. It was similar to being in Canada for the most part. When we come to a healthy middle class and all these other things to take into perspective. Of course, there was always a rural poor population in Venezuela, but the country of Venezuela was actually doing quite well. It had all the resources it needs, much like Canada. It had everything it needed to thrive as a nation, to sustain itself, to grow, to prosper. It was doing okay, and then government changed and policy started shifting, and the country started going in a different direction, and they dangled little things in people's faces, subsidies and really cheap fuel and all these things. And people were like, oh, hey, this is great. I mean, if nothing costs anything, it doesn't really matter how much money we make or who's selling what or how the economy is doing, because guess what? Like we all got fed, we all got gas for our cars, we all can just survive, and life is good. But in the process, what's happening? The government is spending and going down this socialist avenue, and the deficits are growing and the debt is growing, but the GDP is not growing to keep up with the debt. So the overall numbers eventually just can't keep up. We're kind of seeing it to our neighbors south of the border, actually, too. I mean, the American government is shut down for a reason right now, right? Because there's no more money to spend. Like the budget is, and they're not signing off on an extension on the budget. So eventually governments reach their capacity. And if they spend more than they bring in, what happens, my friends? We used to talk about this on my podcast on TikTok all the time. What happens? Well, the debt grows, the deficit grows. You have to release more bonds to somehow cover the deficits that the government is spending, which means more and more of your country's GDP gets owned by investors. It could be pension funds. It could be other countries. Canada owns debts of other countries owns debts of Canada. It can be any entity that wants to invest in the Canadian economy or buy Canadian bonds based on the fact that the government has to issue them because they're spending too damn much money. And Venezuela started really going overboard with that back in the day. And long story short, this isn't about Venezuela, but what happened down there? Eventually, wheelbarrows of money were worthless. People were like burning it on the streets. They were throwing it around like this in the air, $100 bills. It literally became worthless. because mismanagement, gross overspending, poor policies, no structure, government that is directed by a world entity saying, hey, it's better for all people to kind of just go this direction. And essentially, it was really harmful for that country, and it destroyed it. It destroyed it. And they're in recovery mode right now. We all know that. Canada's kind of on that path. Mismanagement with government, overspending, policies that are driven by organizations like the WHO or the WOAH, in the case of the Universal Ostrich Farm and the CFIA. And it all correlates together. So a lot of people over this last, I guess for me, I've been pretty involved there since April, I guess, of this year. I was following it obviously right from the early winter, but I started going out and staying and really advocating and being part of it from April forward. I spent probably half my time at Universal Ostrich Farm since April of this year. And I really learned a lot about the CFIA and this entity that I honestly was a little bit ignorant to before. I was always focused on government overreach, but the CFIA is always kind of just slipping through the cracks until these mass bird calls started happening and people started really looking into it over the last handfuls of years, and then realized, oh wow, the CFIA has control of all this. And then people are like, why does the Canadian Food Inspection Agency have control of all over this stuff? And now, here we are down the road a few years later, and then people like myself and Katie and all these other individuals, particularly Katie's family, because it's happening to them directly, but the rest of us who got involved kind of early on and really gotten involved in the research on it, you started to learn and understand how powerful the CFIA actually is in Canada, what the umbrella is of what they control, from agricultural right to food and beverage and all this other stuff. And it's quite crazy. It's probably one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful organizations in the country, in reality, if you factor in what it controls. Early on, I realized this fight is the fight we've always been fighting. This fight is the same government overreach fight. And what we've been able to do here, and what we realized, a lot of us, is wow, this is the other angles they're coming at Canadians with. This is the overreach over here. This is why food sustainability is becoming an issue. This is why inflation skyrockets. Even though it's not just the reason, these things all factor in and contribute. We're starting to realize that we're not much of a democracy after all. We're a country that elects politicians who creates, and those politicians create bills or policies and laws, and that's what they are. They're lawmakers, they're politicians. And then unelected agencies get control of these policies, and nobody keeps them in check. That's dangerous. That's going down that path of socialism. What I witnessed at the Universal Ostrich Farm on the evening of November 6th, 2025, so just a few days ago, was by far the most chaotic, diabolical thing, I think, that has ever happened on Canadian soil. And not the fact that it was just a call. I know they do calls all the time. How it went down, the whole scenario, factoring in the supporters, the death pen, the 900 rounds of bullets going off through the night, the chaos in that pen, ostriches crashing into each other, all of them crammed into one small space, and then the ones that had to be alive right to the bitter end, as all the other ostriches got killed and fell around them, and they would have been stumbling over them, and it would have been chaos, and there would have been blood everywhere, and it would have been the most unhumane thing you could ever imagine. Think in your human being mind. Men standing on top of hay bales and hundreds of ostriches in that tiny area running around chaotically as bullets are flying. The CFIA said they concurred with an expert that said this is the humane way of doing this. So it was the CFIA directive. Yeah, the marksmen were paid to go out there and do it, and they're accountable for the choice of being part of that. But the CFIA said that this was a perfectly appropriate measure, a perfectly appropriate way to take care of these ostriches. So let's do the math here, guys. It was about a 6-hour period, right, of gunshots going off. So 6 hours. How many minutes is 6 hours? We're going to do some math today. How many minutes is 6 hours? It's 360 minutes, right? So 6 hours, if we give them 6 hours, because they stopped during shift change. In the formal statement, it even says they stopped during shift change because it was unsafe when the police were shifting. So let's go 6 hours of shooting. That's 360 minutes. In the CFIA statement, they said the final number of ostriches was 314. That's what the CFIA said in their final statement. And we know Spirit perished before the call. So if the CFIA number is accurate, let's not even contest that, at 314 birds, that means they called 313 birds according to their admission, not mine, because they said no other birds perished other than Spirit. You guys have all read the CFIA government published documents. So that means in a 360-minute period, they called 313 ostriches. 360 minutes, they called 314 ostriches. And giving them 6 hours, 360 minutes, it was actually probably less than that. But I like to make my numbers bigger so that the guys on the other side of the fence can't go, oh, well, you're exaggerating it. So I always give them the advantage with numbers. So at the most, they were firing shots for 360 minutes, and they killed 313 ostriches. So that means the humane way of killing the ostriches was penciled in at 1 minute, get this straight, 1 minute and like 10 seconds. CFIA, what do you have to say about that, CFIA? The humane way to kill ostriches was putting them all in a pen and killing 13 ostriches in a 6 hour period with bullets flying left and right. You guys all seen the pictures, right? Like, I don't want to be morbid right now, but this is real shit. And we really need to understand what went on here in Edgewood. You've all seen the pictures by now, a lot of you. We've all seen them. A lot of you have seen them. There were birds. I don't even want to talk about it because I got to see the visuals. There was birds like with their legs twisted sideways, upside down, this way, that way, bent over on top of each other. It was diabolically messed up. What went on in there? And to boot, let's talk about another dynamic of this night. At 4 o'clock, we were all up on the highway. You've seen us all over the news up on the highway, and we were watching what was going on because we had a very good vantage point from there. At 4 o'clock, the RCMP decided to close Langill Road and only allow residents of Langill Road to go up Langill Road. So take this into perspective, my friends. You had probably 40 people up on the highway, I don't know, somewhere in that range, maybe more at that time, probably more. And some of them didn't even have their stuff. They had campers and they had all their stuff down at the camp at the house on Langill Road, right? 301 Langill. And everything down there, they maybe got rides or even walked up to the highway. Who knows how they got up there? Some of them drove. I drove up there. And then at 4 o'clock, someone's like, hey, they're not letting anybody back up Langill Road. And I was like, what? How could they not be letting people back up the road? Nobody was being violent. There was no incidents, no arrests that day. A lot of emotion. Everybody heard me screaming and yelling. I'm sure they see me all over the news screaming and yelling at the CFIA. But putting all that aside, just our expressions, just us venting that, how we felt that this was just gross. There was nothing. There was no violence. There was no arrest, no police interaction that was negative. And they chose to close the road. So I raced up there in my truck, to the T at the road to Langill and the turn off to Edgewood. And I roll up and I'm upset. I'm like, dude, like, what's going on? You're not going to let me in. Like, you can't do that. And the cop's like, calm down. So I was like, okay, I'm calming down. I was like, but I'm a little pissed because people are telling me you're not letting people up the road. And I'm like, I'm one of the mediators here, one of the spokespeople for the farm. I've been here since the beginning. I need to be here to keep the peace, to make sure everything is good to, right now. As I was like, look at this tense scenario. And he's just like, well, sorry, if you don't have it on your license, you can't come up. And I was like, bullshit. And I was like, and I seen Henderson who's the sergeant, really good guy. And I'm not going to talk any crap about him. I think he was very professional through the whole thing. Some people don't like him, but my interactions with him were professional. And I asked to speak to him, and I explained the scenario to Henderson, and he knows me. And like I say, I'm not going to say anything bad about him because all my personal interactions with him were not negative. And I do have to take that into consideration. I'm not going to, talk smack. I understand he's a staff sergeant. He's got a role. I understand some people aren't going to like him. There's going to be some interactions people don't like, but my interactions with that one officer were decent. And I explained, I was like, you have to let me in. I was like, come on, man. I have to be there to try keep the peace. My role here. And then after a few minutes of discussing it with him, he's like, okay, I'm going to let you in. We were able to get Doug in. We were able to get Candy in, and we were able to get Drea from Rebel News in because I was like, Candy and Drea have kids. You cannot not let them get to their children. And if they knew they were going to be locked out on the highway, they would have not stepped away from their children. So they let them back in. And those people, myself, Doug, and those two people got back in, and everyone else wasn't allowed in that evening. I went back up to the house and I explained what was going on, and Katie and myself drove back up to Langell Road to talk to them, like, what's going on here? Like, we need to figure things out. Like, we can't leave people on the side of the highway all night long. Like, it's winter. It's dangerous. Like, you can't leave people on the side of the highway like that in the middle of the night. And he was like, I was talking to the PLT, and PLT said, well, it's for public safety. And I was like, public safety? I was like, you're closing the road for public safety. What is unsafe? Like, what is going on for people that they're not creating an unsafe environment? Nobody is doing anything. You guys haven't arrested anybody. There is no issues. He's like, no, I know. But he's like, it's being closed down for public safety, for the CFIA order. And I was like, well, what's different about today and September 23rd? I use September 23rd as the example because September 23rd, there was no stay order. So if you guys remember, they finally got in after that kind of 7 hours of negotiations, the 22nd evening. And the purpose of trying to slow that down was essentially so that we would get to the stay. And we knew Omar needed a couple days to get to that stay. So we needed to slow him down a bit. So we did. And they didn't really get any work done on the 22nd. And they started doing things on the 23rd. So I said to him as an example, there was no stay in effect on the 23rd. And he was like, well, there's no stay anymore, so this is for public safety. I was like, well, there was no stay on the 23rd of September. And you were letting lots of people access the camp on the 23rd of September. How is that different from today? There was no stay at that point on October 6th. And he was using that as an example. And he said, well, on the 23rd, they were preparing. Today, they're doing it. And they hadn't formally announced that they were going to commence that evening. They hadn't formally notified the family. They hadn't formally notified anyone that they were actually going to be killing through the night and doing it right then and there and doing it all right then and there in a quick little no notification. So they thought it was more appropriate. And I would really love to talk to a police commissioner about this in respect and in dignity and in an actual cordial conversation and really understand the thought pattern of why any sergeant in charge, or it wasn't the sergeant I was referring to, that this decision came from above him. So I would love to talk to, the appropriate form of commissioner to find out like why any leader in the RCMP would think that it would be appropriate to lock people out of Langell Road to safely go to their camps, instead to leave them up on the highway, which they were actually closer to the pens at that point. And that was safer. And then to hear 900 rounds go off through the night and know that a lot of those people, there's only one motel in Fauquier. So, Doug graciously drove a whole bunch of people, as many as he could, up to that hotel to get people rooms and stuff like that. The rest just had to sit there, and only 2 more people got in later in the night once the shooting had died down, and then the rest got let back in the morning. That was what made me so angry. I was like, how do you leave these people sitting on the side of the highway and think that is in the name of public safety? They can protest from that side just like we could protest from this side, except they were more in the faces of what was going on up there. It just didn't make sense. It was diabolically chaotic. And I got into an argument with the PLT. And me and that particular PLT officer, we had gotten along quite well the whole way through. I get along well with most of the cops, all the cops pretty much. They know that I'm a loud dude. I speak a lot, I say a lot, and a lot of them respect that and listen. Some of them don't like me. I get it. That's just how the world works. But I've always kept a balance. I made a commitment that I would work hard to help them keep the peace, and I would help us not get arrested, and everyone would stay there till the end. And we were able to achieve that. But in these last moments, watching the RCMP kind of go a little sideways, it really broke my trust with PLT. It really, really bothered me after developing such decent relationships for a 7-week period. Like, we didn't just interact with these gentlemen and ladies for a couple days. Like, they became the people we interacted with the most in life sometimes, like all day long in the early days of negotiating and trying to communicate with the CFIA and trying to establish that. And thank you, Amy. I'm at home with my family right now. I'm going to mute you because you're not here for the right reason. Have a good day. I'm not going to put up with trolls anymore, guys, because we got a battle to fight. I'm with my wife, my beautiful wife, at home, and my kids today. My wife, she's a beautiful woman. She was waiting at the door with open arms when I got home to give me a hug, to embrace me. You know, it's tough. It's tough on the family when you do this kind of stuff. But you know what? We're stronger than that at the end of the day. And in little moments, don't hinder us. So you guys get your head in the game if you're here for the right reason. You know, let's work on saving the world together instead of focusing on the little things that don't matter so much anymore. You know, that whole night at the end of the day proved exactly what's wrong with our country. This is Canada. And I seen the look on a lot of the officers. There was a point, you'll see a video, I don't know who published it. It might have been Mike Rood or, I don't know, Luca's always creeping around with his camera. So, I mean, he's always kind of spying on me from the back somewhere. So, I'm sure Luca got it on camera too. The cops were lining up in front of us that night. Right where they lined up. You guys recall day one when they came in and they put up the yellow tape to the laneway into the other side of the property where the birds are. And they put up the yellow tape and they all stood on it. Well, they did that again the night of the call. And I stood there and I counted them all, one by one. And there was 19 officers standing on that line and a couple standing in the back. There wasn't even like 13 or 14 protesters or supporters, I should say, standing in front of them at that moment. Because they had a whole bunch of them stuck on the highway up there. And then they had the rest of the officers at the end of the road with a roadblock. And then a whole whack of officers in the field protecting the CFIA zones or whatever. But the majority of the 19 officers standing in front of 13 protesters. 19 officers standing in front of 13 protesters. You heard me flipping out. Hell yeah, you heard me flipping out. I own every word I say. I was flipping out at the CFIA. Hell yeah, I was. Those people are pieces of shit. The people that did that work, that agreed to do that work in that fashion, are not good human beings. A CFIA that thinks that is a humane way to dispose of healthy ostriches are sick in the head. We have sickos running government agencies. Like guys like Joseph Goebbels, man. Like sickos, in my opinion, running government agencies. So yeah, I'm pissed off. And I was pissed off that night. Hell yeah. And I kept it together for 10 months. But you know what? I let it out that night. And you know what? The police let me vent because they knew that I wasn't saying anything against the law, that I was preaching my own words. I was preaching God's words, and I was speaking the truth at the end of the day. And you know what? I know we got through to a lot of those officers. A lot of those officers were listening. I was standing there and this old lady officer was like shaking her head, and you know, like she was full on engaged. So you know what? We might not have got them to stand down, but we got through to a lot of minds on that line that night, and they knew what was going on was messed up. And they all now will reflect on that. You know, we have to reflect on the fact that we're at the point where corrupted government agencies are using RCMP and taxpayer dollars to solidify these sorts of operations. That's messed up. Millions and millions and millions of your taxpayers' dollars, hundreds of officers and vehicles and resources that could be serving their communities where they're needed the most to prevent violence and to prevent theft and to prevent, drug sales and abuse, all the things that we should be protecting people against. No. What are they doing? They're hanging out in Edgewood, protecting a diabolical beast of a machine that's given unchecked power by our government. Enough is enough. This is Canada. Like, speak up. Why aren't more people speaking up? And I appreciate all of you that continue to stand by us and understand this is far greater than just the ostrich call. And what we fight for is the same thing we started fighting for years ago. And I was proud to be part of this cause because this cause aligns exactly with the fundamental direction we have to go as a country, or we're hooped. This overreach we always talk about, that we always fight against, that we always point out, this is a perfect prime example of it. Do you agree in the bin chase going on? I don't have an opinion on that stuff, Amy. Like, you gotta just... Do you see me chasing bins? Do you see me talking about bins? You know what I'm talking about? I'm talking about the future of our goddamn country. And I'm talking about the reality that we just witnessed at the Universal Ostrich Farm. I don't care if you guys think that it was okay. I know there's some trolls in this chat right now. And I try to allow the people that think differently to be here too, because I'm not about silencing people. But what I'm about is respectful dialogue. So, I do silence people when they can't stay cordial and can't seem to ask questions and disagree in a respectful fashion. But at the end of the day, I don't care if you agree or disagree with the CFIA being allowed to call the birds. Whatever. You can be one of those people that agrees with the policy. It's not my place to make you think whatever you want. You get to decide what you want to think in life. But you know what? Even if you think that the CFIA should have been allowed to do this, you should be disgusted in the fashion that it went down. You should be disgusted in the process. You should be disgusted in the fact that those birds were starved and mistreated, in my opinion, the whole way through, because we watched them get weaker and lethargic and drinking out of mud puddles and eating tree seeds out of the mud. This is real stuff. So I don't care if you agree with the CFIA and you're like, oh, the law is the law and blah, 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 blah. Great. That's your opinion. You're allowed to be that way, but you should be fundamentally disgusted with what just happened. No one should agree that that was okay, regardless if you agreed with the stamp out policy. They were, yes. I left really, really late last night. They were all still there. From what I understand, they're going to be here till Tuesday, Wednesday-ish. So they failed. They failed at upholding the policy that allowed them to kill those birds. They failed at something that they have total control over. How do you fail at something when you're given complete control, all the resources you need, all the money you need to get it done, and you fail horribly in that process? Why is that agency then allotted so much unchecked power? And why are Canadians okay with that? And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I want to throw something out there, and it's something I've pondered, and I've done some math on, and I'm a pretty bright guy, and I've done some research. So they hauled all the ostriches out in 5 40-yard Super Save bins, right? We know this because we watched them line them with plastic. The whole world watched because we publicized it, and they used bobcats and little loaders, and they picked the birds up and they dumped them into the Super Save bins. So guess what? We're not crazy. The birds were getting hauled with Super Save bins after all, weren't they? Isn't that gross? Super Save was actually participating in the removal of the dead birds all along. We're not crazy after all, right? But long story short, talking about the end. So 5, I want to give you guys some info, and then I want you to go out in your world, and I want you to ponder this because you're all smart people. So the CFIA said their final number was 314 ostriches. We believe that to be low because Karen believes she had more birds than that. It was pretty obvious that there was, but regardless of all that, let's go on the 314 that the CFIA says. So the CFIA, in their public statement yesterday, said that the final number of birds that were disposed of was 314 birds. Okay, let's take this into perspective. If you do some simple research, now these birds were big on the Universal Ostrich Farm. Not all ostriches are as big as others, but they had some big birds on this farm, big older birds, big ones. When you Google it even and get some general information about ostriches, you'll find that the average ostrich, if you take the high and the low, is anywhere from 200 to 350 pounds. 200 to 350 pounds. Right? Now, the average volume by yard of an ostrich, it ranges, but it's anywhere from around a yard to like 1.6 to 1.8 yards. 5 40-yard bins, which have weight capacities. 314 ostriches. That even on the low are about a cubic yard. And then unfortunately, even if they're cramming those poor birds in there, they're still big. I mean, you're going to get a few more in, but it's not going to change things dramatically. And then putting the volume aside, let's talk about the weight. Even if we go on the low end, 200 pounds. And we know a lot of those birds were well over 300 pounds. You know, when the range on Google says 200 to 350, some of those birds at Universal Ostrich Farm were those birds that were well over 300 pounds. Some of those big guys, some of those big 8 foot tall, 9 foot tall roosters, they were big, heavy birds. So let's say, could we safely say 250? Would that number even work for the trolls? Because I don't want to be misleading here with weight. Like, I want everybody to work together with the same numbers here. So would it be appropriate if I averaged it out to 250 a bird, with the highs being 350, with the lows being 200? It might even average out to higher. But would you guys be okay with me averaging that number to 250 a bird? So let's say that if you guys don't mind, even if I go with that low number of 250 and we times that by 314 ostriches, because that's what the CFIA says they disposed of in the end, was 314 ostriches. And now I'm not a conspiracy theorist here, guys. I just want you to work with me here, because I'm actually reaching out to you guys to try to help me clarify. Maybe my numbers are wrong. I don't know. So say we went with 250. Sorry, it doesn't matter what we counted, Carrie. We're going by what they claimed. Right? What they claimed to move in 5 bins. So work with me for a second, Carrie, and we might get to right where you're getting to. So anybody got a calculator on them right now? I want someone else to run the numbers for me, not me this time. 250 pounds, so 250 times 314. Has anybody got that overall number for me? 314 times 250. $78,500. 78,500. You're right, PJ. 78,500, Terry. Yeah, we got a few 78,000s. Exactly. That's what the number is. I've ran that number too. I've run that number a whole bunch of times, and I've run it different ways, and I've done different averages, and then I've done the cubic volumes, and we spent some time. We geeked out a little bit. And then we got other people to geek out a little bit. People that geek out even more than I geek out. And, on the low end, we came up with that. Low end, we came up with 78,500 pounds of ostrich carcasses. Sorry, that's morbid, guys. I apologize, but it is what it is. So I want you guys to do some math for me now. Again. Let's work together. 78,500 pounds divided by 5. No, there was 5 trucks. 78,500 divided by 5. 15,700. Winner, 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 chicken dinner. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. So you're telling me they put 15,700 pounds of ostrich carcasses in each one of those 40-yard bins? And they picked those bins up, because that would be over capacity to start. So shame on you if that's the truth, Super Safe. And you're telling me that bin truck pulled, I watched it. You're telling me that bin truck lifted that bin back up with that cable with 15,700 pounds plus the bin weight onto that truck without its front end bouncing? I'm a trucker. I got a class 1 license, by the way, guys. So I think when it comes to the next points, I'm allowed to speak. I know what the weight restrictions are on everything, especially when it comes to hauling on the highway. That was one of my first gigs as a class 1 operator, was hauling on the highway. So you're telling me, if that's the truth, CFIA, that you guys put 15,700 pounds on average of ostrich carcasses in each one of those bins. And then that means that bin weight, now I don't know exactly what the bin weight is. We'd have to look that up. If someone's got a computer in front of them, let's do some math together here. What does the average 40-yard bin weigh? It's like just the weight of the empty bin. What does the average 40-yard steel bin weigh? 7 tons, someone says. 7 tons. So 14,000. No, yeah, we know what the weight of the birds is. The weight of the birds is almost 8 tons, actually. It's 15,700. 8 tons is 16,000 pounds. But I want to know just what the empty bin weight is. Because now we're going to figure out what the legal capacity would be to haul these bins down to the coast. Laws getting broke left and right. Policies getting broke. Lies being told. I mean, it's clearly done by amateurs, because little old stupid me is here figuring all this stuff out really easily. And that's another depressing factor. These people are given that kind of power. These sick, demented people are given that kind of power, and they're really actually not very bright in any way, shape, or form. Exactly. An average 40-yard bin holds 10 to 12,000. 12 would be a lot. 12 would actually be considered a lot. I know this because I drove bin trucks when I was younger. The math don't math. And I'm sorry, you can disagree with me. You can call me crazy and everything. You can call us conspiracy theorists. You cannot agree with the farm. You can love the CFIA and their policies. But the math, it doesn't math. Now, if there wasn't 314 birds there at the time of disposal, then the math might add. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? It really makes you wonder, considering there was a lot of speculation that about 70 birds were missing. What would 70 birds be times 250? That'd be 15,000 pounds, wouldn't it? 15,000 pounds divided by 5 bins would be 3,000 pounds off of each bin. And then what would they weigh? 12,700. Slightly doable. You could pull that off. The math just don't math unless they didn't put 314 birds in 5 bins. Just saying. I'm not making any claims. I'm just saying the math doesn't seem to math. And I want you guys all out there in the smart world. You guys are all smart. Share this. I want you to talk about it with your friends. Go sit down at the coffee shop. Run some numbers. Google some info. Take the highs. Take the lows. Figure some stuff out. The math just doesn't seem to math. Just saying. Call me crazy? Just saying, though. So you're telling me I shouldn't be mad? I shouldn't be screaming at this entity at the top? The world should be screaming at this entity. The world should be shouting at the CFIA. And the world should be shouting at Mark Carney right now, saying, what the hell is your government doing, allowing this nonsense to happen? And you sit back and you do nothing about it. You don't even speak publicly, barely, on the matter. What kind of banana republic has Canada become? We are going down that path of destruction right before our eyes, and we're not even paying attention to it. And you know why? The same reason why they weren't paying attention to it back in the 30s in Germany. You know why? Because they were too busy trying to figure out how to put food on the table, too busy trying to figure out how to pay the mortgage, too busy trying to figure out how to keep the lights and the gas on, too busy trying to figure out how they were going to get to work, because that's the world that we're living in right now. Because of the decisions of your government, everything's harder for everybody. The middle class ain't the middle class anymore. It keeps getting eroded from the bottom, because now it costs more and more and more and more to become the middle class. So now we are slowly turning into a two-tier society where you got people that make it and you got people that are breaking it. And we're not paying attention. We're not focused. And I'm not a hater, and my heart is not filled with anger. But when are we going to come together from the left and the right and say, fuck liberals, fuck conservatives, fuck different ideologies, forget about different religions and skin colors, and saying, if we don't all get our shit together and rise up and have some sort of mental revolution, some sort of revelation inside of us all, saying we all have to say right now enough is enough and we need to change things. When are we going to do that? When are we going to be willing to make that moment happen? Because we've been trying for a while. Because if we don't, your children will suffer, my children will suffer, and the future will suffer. And that is the truth behind it all. It doesn't matter about our perspectives. I don't care if you agree with the CFIA. You shouldn't agree with government overreach. You shouldn't agree with agencies that have that kind of control and power. You should not agree with what happened the evening of November 6th in Edgewood, BC. That will be scarred in my mind and in my heart forever. If I wasn't there at ground zero and experienced it, I would maybe not believe that could happen on Canadian soil. I am shocked that happened on Canadian soil. And I always was standing against government overreach. But I tell you, whatever last little inspiration I was lacking is now inside of me because of my experience in Edgewood. And I will continue on my path of promoting freedom, promoting unity, promoting change, promoting better for the future. And I will always carry what we just went through at the Universal Ostrich Farm right in my pocket, right at my heart the whole way through. Because that is what we're fighting against, that exact debauchery, that exact action, that exact waste, that exact pestilence is what we as Canadians as a whole need to stand against before it's too late. That's who I am, and that's who I will continue to be. And that's who I was before this, and that's who I will be till the last breath. And I hope a lot of you out there are fed up. And the ones who have always been fed up, the ones who have always been on the front line saying enough is enough, trying to just wake people up, I see you and appreciate you. But the ones who are now coming to the table, the ones who are now saying, yeah, you're right, you guys are right, things are messed up, we need to do something about it, I love you too. And I appreciate you just as much. Because I know how hard it is to look at your system and realize it's broken and say, yeah, you know what, we got to change it. That's a very tough realization for a lot of people. So I appreciate each and every one of you that every day just wakes up to this case. Do you think we want it to be like this? I would love more than anything for it not to be like this, so I could go back. You know who I am? I'm like a Noah. I grow vegetables, and I got a garden, and we have grapes and berries, and I love to hang out at home, and I love to hike, and I love to be in the mountains, and I love to enjoy life. But guess what? We can't enjoy that life if it gets taken away from us. What happens next? What happens when I'm not even allowed to have garden at home, where I'm not even allowed to grow grapes and berries and raspberries and strawberries and all sorts of vegetables? And what happens when that's all regulated? What happens when you're no longer allowed to have a couple chickens, which a lot of places you're not already? What happens when all the little ma and pa shops cease to exist and all that's left is Walmart and Superstore, Costco, and we get what we get? And if we don't buy it, we're shit out of luck. What happens when there is no more Universal Ostrich Farms out there? Do you know how many lives that place has touched this year alone, let alone probably in the history of its existence? How many people have pulled off that highway to visit those ostriches, to experience them for themselves? It was an iconic staple. Anytime I would travel that highway, hey, there's the ostrich farm. Kids would learn. Karen would bring bus loads of kids in. They would learn about ostriches. They'd raise them. They would hatch them. They would help other farms get started, teach people about the procedures and the protocol of helping them be healthy. You didn't just call 314 ostriches. You eliminated priceless science. You eliminated potential antibody development in research that could have changed the avian flu fight. You eliminated decades of learning and work and experience. You eliminated decades of field trips and family road trips. You eliminated a tiny piece of what we are. And that's what they continue to do. Step by step, slowly but surely, attack us. One little slice of the pie at the time. Till there ain't no more pie left. Till we're all begging for the heel of the bread. Enough's enough, Canadians. It's time to rise up. Come here, champ. Come see. Want to say hi? Come on. Tell everybody. Say rise up.
Rise up.
Time to rise up, everybody.
Everybody.
This is why we fight, guys. We fight for the future. We fight for the next generation. Because if we don't fight for them, who's going to fight? So you can talk all the smack you want. You can think that what we do isn't right, but I'll tell you one thing. You should be thanking God that people like us, people like those boots on the ground at the Universal Ostrich Farm, people like Karen and Katie and Dave, you should be thanking God we all exist in this world still. Because once that doesn't exist anymore, nothing is stopping the chaos from taking right over. So rise up with me. Rise up with Katie. Rise up with Karen and Esper and Dave. Not in violence. Rise up in change. Rise up in unity. Demand better. Because if enough of us demand better together, united, it will happen. And it's the only way it's going to happen. I appreciate each and every one of you. Everything you always do. From my family, my two beautiful children, my beautiful wife. Thank you for all the wonderful words that you send me. My email wasn't working and I didn't even know it. Something happened to it. It's all fixed now. But all the wonderful messages, any support people have sent on the way, you don't know how grateful I am for that. I'm not the type of guy that would ever ask anybody for anything, and I never would. But, you know, people who randomly just reach out and, you know, wanted to be there for us, I don't even know what to say. I see all of you people. Don't think I don't. And my heart is big because of you all. Keep the fight going. Inspire each other to be better. Hug your neighbor. Ask him what's going on. Ask her what's going on. Help the old lady across the street mow her lawn. Carry somebody's groceries. Hold the door. Stand up for your neighbor. Stand on that front line when you need to. Stand up for humanity. Stand up for good. Stand up for God. Stand up for faith. Stand up for love. Stand up for truth. And I promise you, one thing I can promise you, you won't regret it. Because in the hardship, I don't regret one moment of it all. And thanks to my rock, my beautiful wife, I get to be a powerful man with my voice. Much love, everybody. You're all awesome too. And I appreciate each and every one of you. Let's rise up. This isn't the end. This is the start. Reach out, connect with your people in your community. Put things together. Start focusing on each other. Start making the system irrelevant. Start forcing it to change. Stop with the bread and circus. Don't allow them to feed us bread and circus anymore. No more left and right. Remember that left and right was only created so that you don't blame them for the shit that they do to us. So you blame each other. Love you all. I'm going to go hang out with my kiddos. Tune in a little later. See you back out on the farm in a couple days. I appreciate all of you. We are the seeds of change. We are exactly what this world needs, what it's always needed, what it will continue to need. And the world, it's watching. It's watching now.
global